I'm Sarah Hodges, and this is Executives Uncut, the podcast where we provide solutions for the corporate cycle of hell. Now, today, we're talking all about overcoming status obsession. It's going to be a good one, you guys. And I am here with John Whitaker, Executive Vice President and CHRO with National Partners in Healthcare. His podcast, which I was on, Hey John, HR Hardball, is currently trending on iTunes and Spotify, and it was so much fun. I enjoyed being on your podcast more than I can say. You just made it so easy, and we flowed and hopefully gave people some really great content. So I had to have you back to talk to us.
Well, if people haven't listened to that one, they must listen to that episode because that's almost like not even close popularity-wise. That has been a bullet one. I think I don't want to spoil the lead, but Sarah gets very transparent with me, and it's fantastic.
I say a lot of things that people don't say in general.
No.
And then I say them in public. Why didn't I close my door? Like, this is live. It's live. My door is like hanging open. I don't even know how that happened. But yeah, so I think that's part of the fun though, right? Is that like, whether it's your podcast or mine, just not holding anything back and being real, which totally lends into what we're talking about today, right? Which is overcoming status obsession. And maybe I'll let you describe, if that's cool with you, what you think status obsession is and your personal experience with it.
Sure. And I know this kind of dovetails off the topic that we discussed when you were on my shows, authenticity. And I know we're big believers in authenticity. I think as a younger professional, I probably was status obsessed myself. I can remember having dreams that I got that promotion. I finally became a district manager, and when it didn't happen, how disappointed I was. And along the way, I wasn't doing the things that would have earned that promotion. That's beside the fact. But I wanted that title because at the time, and I'm going to date myself, that meant I got a pager. I could wear a pager. Ooh. And that was a real status symbol in those days. So as you become a little bit more mature in your profession, I think, well, a couple things can happen. You can work for a company and the best route is the safe route. Mm-hmm. And the best thing to do is just kind of go along to get along. Or you can advance to where you get to a level where all of a sudden you realize I have reached a pretty high level here, and I better just chill out now. I think I referred to it as having your finger on the chicken shit button. Yeah. You don't want to get there and then say the wrong thing or be too, you don't want to be too controversial or now I'm talking directly to the CEO. I don't want to piss him off or piss her off. And I think what happens though, is we get tied to the title, the comfort, whatever, and we forget what got us there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing everything that you're saying, and I want to talk about it in depth. I also want to acknowledge the fact that you really wanted that pager. I'm thinking we have to talk about the pager because I do remember it was such a status symbol, and there are those symbols, right? Those external symbols that we look for that we want to obtain, whether it's the car that we drive or jewelry that we're wearing or the shoes that we're wearing, right? And they mean something. They tell the world something. And I think that then perpetuates this need for status obsession.
Well, it's so funny. I worked my first job out of school. I went to Texas A&M, graduated with absolutely no idea what I wanted to do other than follow my girlfriend to California. That was the plan. And ended up working for Gallo Wines, which I found out is where a lot of guys who have no idea what they want to do end up as their first job because it's a hell of a sales job. It's great, but they work you to death. And it looked like a fraternity, 250 guys all wearing their ties and short sleeve shirts. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But certain guys had the pager and they walked around like just cocks of the walk, like, hey, they would come in the room and everybody's like, oh, he must be a DM. He must be a district manager. One day, I'm going to have that. I'm going to have that pager that just came in a session.
Yeah. Yeah. I want you to know that when I was 14, I also had a pager.
I hate you for saying that you were 14.
On multiple layers. I know you do. First that I had one, but you know what's really funny? I actually won it on a radio show. I had to say like pagers are something. It was like popples are pagers for people or something. I had to say it 5 times in 5 seconds. And people who've listened to my podcast may notice that I speak really fast. And you know what? Won me a pager at 14. So I might have been walking around with a pager Well, you didn't have one, and I had more status than you at 14. But when you think about that, like how ridiculous is that, right? That these status symbols, that are meaningless. So I mean, and yet they make us kind of try to morph and be certain people and do certain things that really reduce our value.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think that, well, I can think of company cars when that was still a thing, things like that. When you got to a certain level, you got these things and you'd made it. And now your job is to keep it, not to keep doing, more things, better things, more aggressive things. Your job now is don't screw it up. So, yeah, we do. And you compromise your values. If you think about HR specifically, what gets us ahead, you have to be able to have these unbelievably frank and open and honest discussions, but just like you do. All right. You're a coach. So you're not doing your clients any good by, blowing sunshine up their skirt. You have to tell them what's going on. Yeah, and you have to do it in a way that totally disengage them. If you're in HR and you can do that, you have to maintain that with yourself too. I mean, you have to be authentic to yourself and not decide, well, you know what, this is a good time for me just to shut up when that something has to be said, when you know it and you do.
But you don't want to rock the boat, right? So you're
Right.
like, oh, I'm not gonna say this to the CEO because I don't want to rock the boat. And I hear often when people are leading up, they're like, well, I'm not really sure, like, how do I approach this subject? How do I do this? How do I say that? And it becomes a problem when they really do want to help that person and they don't want to upset them, which is
Yeah.
natural. But also when there's that underlying, I want to protect my status, I want to protect my role. So then what does somebody do in that situation? What do you think?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I mean, I think first of all, you have to fundamentally kind of reset yourself. What is it really that I'm all about? And I think if your job, or excuse me, if your life is wrapped up in what your title is at work, then you're focused on the wrong things, first of all. I mean, I think that if that's your biggest problem in the world, you got it better than about 90% of the world. Okay. So, if this pandemic has taught us nothing else, I think it maybe a lot of us got back with family, got back with some of the essentials. We're not traveling so much. We're not so tied up in work like we maybe had been. And you know what? The most essential things we each had were within arm's reach of us. That's what's important, not necessarily did I get the promotion. So I think that's a fundamental thing is you have to say, okay, what am I all about, and kind of level set.
Yeah, and I think that can be really freeing too, and in a sense, in the long run, help you be hopefully even more successful when you say, you know what, it's actually more important to me to live in gratitude, to live into my values, as opposed to always being on this path of either wanting to achieve more status, wanting to get the next best thing, or wanting to hold on to the status that you have. If that particular role doesn't match your values.
Well, you're right, and it might be that you're going to find that you're not in the right place. It might be you're not in the right role, you're not in the right company, but you're doing yourself a disservice and the company a disservice if you stick around. And I think sometimes that takes courage. I've had conversations with people before who are talented. They worked for me or with me, and just had to say, I think that you're not. We don't get the best you. We don't get the best you because you fundamentally just don't like this type of pace or this type of environment. It's just not for you. And can you have those conversations with yourself, or can you have that conversation with a colleague that you think enough of to have that conversation with them?
Yeah, and sometimes I have that conversation with my executive clients who have a very, very talented, incredibly skilled individual working for them in their company, right? They're Rory Rowland calls it the PITA, the pain in the asset.
Yeah.
And it's that person who excels, and yet they are a cultural downer, or their values do not match the company values.
Hmm.
And when that happens, it's actually, I think, kind to cut them loose and help them find the kind of environment that where they would thrive. And that will also help your company thrive because you're not having someone who's rowing in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Well, I've got personal experience with this. I've done that myself. I've helped my wife through that a couple of times where she's been so, it's almost like you're just doggedly determined. No, I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it work, even though you are just hitting your head against the wall every time, because it's not going to happen because you and the company just don't jibe. And the freedom, now, just give you an example. She's in a startup making no money, happier than she's ever been though, because she's doing something that she loves. And I'm sure you can relate to that. You've been corporate and now you're doing something that you're passionate about. I did the same thing. I realized I'm not a Fortune 100 guy. I'm just not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I just can't do that. I'm more of a nimble private equity backed quarterly results and lean and mean. So
Mm-hmm.
find your place. And happiness. I had one of my podcast episodes with Dr. Pillay. I don't know if you could pretend like you listen to it. He's great, but
Awesome.
his whole quote was happiness comes first, then success. And so we get that reversed a lot. We think we want to be successful, so we'll be happy, and a lot of that has to do with the status obsession.
Yeah, well, can you tell us more about your journey, or maybe even your wife's journey, where, if that's okay, where you guys came to the realization that happiness is more important than status, and how you grappled with that and then maneuvered forward?
Yeah, you know what? For me, it was really weird. I was kicking around in a lot of different jobs. I would be the typical job hopper when I was in my 20s. I mean, I really was going from one to another because I wasn't happy anywhere.
Mhm.
And then I ended up landing somebody, a personal friend knew somebody that was just looking for somebody to be a director of operations. Now I was 27 years old and that sounded really cool. Had no idea what that meant. But what it meant was making about 25 grand a year doing everything for a company because it was his side business. So I was
Mm,
making, a third of what I had been making, was working in a little rat's nest of an office, and I loved it. I loved it. It was because my hair was on fire 24 hours a day. And I realized, that's what I need. That's what I need I need to be because I'd worked for, really reputable companies, pharma companies and Fujifilm, Wyeth, Gallo. I mean, I was working with all the right people and I was just a little dot on the screen like everybody else. Then I went to this
mhm.
little nothing place and I had a chance I like making an influence. I like making decisions. I like making things happen. And the money part, eventually the money part catches up if you're doing
Yeah.
something you love, So that was when, for me, that was my personal realization is don't stay where you're not happy because there are other doors will open. I promise you they will open.
Huh.
You can't hang around until everything works out. Doesn't work
Mhm.
that way.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense in what you were saying earlier, is that, that status obsession will decrease your value, and where focusing on your happiness will increase your value. Can you give a little more detail about that, though, about how status obsession really decreases value?
Sure. I think that, and again, going back to maybe the more senior you get in a role, and I know in HR especially, I think HR needs to be tied in like a triumvirate. CFO, CEO, and your CHRO need to be able to, counter each other, balance each other, and disagree with each other at times too. You've got the business, you've got the operations, you have the people.
Yeah.
And if you are in HR and the more senior you get, you just you compromise maybe what your beliefs are because, well, I know that this is going to make the profit sheet or the P&L is going to look great, but my
Mhm.
people are going to suffer. And if you allow that, then right there you've compromised your value. Now if you go down into any of the levels where you're an HR business partner, for instance, and your client groups have people who are either not performing or not living up to expectations, or the opposite side, they have a manager that's not doing that. Those are the tough ones too. And you're not
Mhm.
addressing those issues, you've compromised your value. You're basically drawing a salary to write policy.
Right.
And I could get that on Google, you know.
Yeah. But I mean, I that's interesting to think about it from like the HR and managerial perspective. I've typically thought about this from the sales perspective. I think that, I can see a very close relationship and how status obsession compromises someone's value in a sales relationship, because you're not able to really develop rapport, or genuinely connect authentically with the person who you are wanting to sell to. I think of services. We were talking earlier about financial advisors and how often they
Hmm.
reach out to you on LinkedIn, and I think that I've coached so many financial advisors, and I see this a lot, wanting that status, wanting to increase the AUM, wanting to get that next client. And so they're trying to morph like this chameleon and do whatever they can to try to develop that relationship. But the client always kind of feels like there's something off, or the prospect is like, I don't quite trust this person because they're not being authentic in who they are. And in that regard, they lessen their value.
Yeah, it's so funny because I think about as you were saying that, you think about maybe some of the people that have worked for you or with you, and I've had I've had groups of people in the room. They might report to me or be in my organization, and there's one person who would be they're kind of the truth teller, and or they'll say something you're like, I can't believe you just said that, but you know what? That person. I believe that person now because they're giving me the real thing, and they'll challenge the status quo. They're not being inappropriate, but they are saying things the other people in the room probably wanted to say, but for one reason or not didn't. And they have a way to do it, kind of makes you laugh or whatever. And you're like, there's value in that for me, because then those people keep you humble too, and there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, there's something very disarming about just genuine authenticity, I think. Don't you? Where it allows people to actually hear what you're saying because they know that it's not coming from a place of manipulation. It's just saying the truth.
Yeah, well, it's like you were talking about with sales, that you can smell it. You can smell it all over, right?
Yeah.
It's like, dude, no, these are all my favorite things too. Let's talk more about this. And oh God, I just can't even deal with it. So
totally. But I know that you came up with 3 tips for us. Can we start digging into those? Because I think they're really awesome tips that are going to be really valuable to share with our audience.
Well, I do think first and foremost, we mentioned you have to, take a look around and get some perspective. You really do. It's, look at where we are, look at, the time in history where we are. I know we've had like a rough year, but we still have it better than everybody. People, let's get some perspective. Okay. We worked an event yesterday. My wife and I did, and our sons. It's a, feed the homeless event in downtown Fort Worth. You need to do things like that because get perspective. We have everything. There's people who have nothing. So get perspective. And if your biggest problem is the promotion or something like that, and that's what you're tied up in, you're focused on the wrong thing. Now, being from Texas, I do have a few colloquialisms I throw around all the time because I think they're cool. But I think you compromise your value because you don't pick a side, you don't make a statement. You're just in the middle. And we've always said the middle of the road is for yellow lines and dead armadillos. You don't want to be in the middle of the road. If there's nothing there but bad news. And so if you are, if you're obsessed with status, then you're probably hedging your bets. And I think, yeah,
that's a really good point. Mm-hmm.
And then the final tip I think was just look at where you are. If you're constantly running up against either value contradictions or work style contradictions in who you are versus what your employer embraces, then are you in the right place? No, be authentic and go to a place where you can thrive and that will embrace how you really are, not the person not the mask you wear to this job because it's where you're supposed to work.
I love it. Those are all incredibly helpful. For those of us who are Northerners, you can also change this to, middle of the road is for yellow lines and dead raccoons. Or cats. I've seen an armadillo once in my life, so.
They are the oddest looking creature you've ever seen in your life. I promise you that.
Armadillos?
Oh
yeah, I only saw it in the dark once.
You what? You saw one in the dark once?
I saw one in the dark once in Georgia. Yeah, but that's the only time I've ever seen one. Maybe at a zoo, but I certainly have never seen one dead in the middle of the road. So I'm like, wait, what?
Oh no, they're prehistoric. But what is it you guys in the north have against cats and raccoons?
You just see a lot of cats and raccoons and groundhogs in the middle of the road. Right? Emily, Justin, they're in the back, they're backstage, but Emily and Justin, if they were here right now, they would be like, yeah, we definitely see dead. So you're gonna nod? Emily just popped in. Yeah. She's like, yeah.
Justin said deer.
Justin. Emily, I'm gonna add you in. Emily, she's gonna be mad at me. Emily, no, she removed herself. Are you serious?
Look at that. She turned her camera off.
So embarrassed. So rude. Okay, Emily, I'm gonna unmute you, okay? Emily, have you ever ran over a rabbit, a cat, or a raccoon? Oh, she's still, I can't hear her. Oh.
I haven't done that, and I'm honestly surprised. I hope it stays that way.
Really? Oh my gosh, I've definitely ran over, not a cat, but a raccoon and a rabbit.
Mhm.
Justin, what about you?
Never ran over anything.
Now you just jinxed the whole group. You jinxed the whole group.
Yeah.
Seen raccoons,
You know why?
rabbits, and deer. That's about it. No
Yeah.
armadillos.
But to cycle it all back, these guys know how to show up authentically. You guys are awesome about that. And that's the reason why they're not right in the middle of the line. So they're not running into the raccoons.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, we
Anyway,
have
sorry.
armadillos and squirrels. Squirrels is the other one down here.
Squirrels, yeah.
We do. I've seen a lot of squirrels. I've saved some squirrels. I slammed on the brake, and then I was like, "What am I doing?" I could have, caused an accident from slamming on my brake for a squirrel. Love in my heart. Okay, let's get to the coaching challenge. You guys can leave. Get out. They're like, thank God. Oh, Emily's. I'm gonna get so much shit for that. Okay, I can tell that her face.
That's
like,
great.
I hate you. They're the best. I love them so much. Okay. Coaching challenge, which I think that this discussion about impression management and status obsession is really helpful for those of us who, despite COVID, are going to be meeting with our family. Some people are still going home or maybe even Zooming with family. They're getting like the round robin letter, like, oh, well, Johnny just got into a fancy private school, right? And it's so often we get home and we can feel it. We feel like we have to like share all of the great things that are happening, and we have to show up with that pager on our hip and tell everyone how awesome we are. So this week, especially, whether it's at work or whether it's at home, your coaching challenge is just notice if you're trying to manage the impressions of others around you, and ask yourself why. Are you trying to tell everyone about your status or show them the new fancy truck that you got or whatever it may be? And ask yourself why. What is it that you're trying to prove? What are you trying to do here? What impression are you trying to make? And do you really need to? Or can you just show up as your authentic self and be your awesome self, whether they like it or not? I encourage you to give it a
cure for
try.
that, Sarah. It's a good cure. Because I've had to do this myself too, because all the family. Oh God, you mentioned that. I started laughing. Get into the practice of asking them. Just start asking everybody what's going on in their life, and don't let the conversation turn to you. Just be interested in everybody else. Be curious in everybody else, and that'll get you out of it.
Look, bonus tip from John. Thank you. That's a really great tip. That's very, very practical. Love it.
Go on, you.
No, seriously, John. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you for all of your amazing tips. Where can our viewers find out more about you and your podcast?
Hopefully they will listen to the podcast, especially the episode with Being Authentic with Sarah Hodges. But my podcast is called HR Hardball. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on... There it is.
That right there. Wait,
you can find it on iHeart. I also have a blog. I've been writing the HR Hardball blog for about 10 years. And the podcast is something COVID, that was my COVID teaching moment this year. Is like, you know what? I'm tired of writing all the time. I'm gonna go audio. So those two, and you know what? And unless you're gonna try to send me a wealth management LinkedIn request, connect with me on LinkedIn, because I don't have any wealth to manage. I promise you. Let's connect and have real conversations. I almost always accept a connection for somebody I know they wrote it. It's the templates. God, come on.
Are rough.
What are we, stupid? I don't know a template. Come on.
I know it's so hard out there, and that's just it, right? Show up authentically, whether it's on LinkedIn or whether it's at Christmas or whatever you celebrate with your families. Just show up authentically, and it's going to help you build real connections. And then maybe you'll get an invite to be on someone's podcast.
Ooh. Or their live streamcast. It's the first time I've ever done this. I got to tell you, this is kind of a pucker moment, because you could always say something. Are you not familiar with that phrase?
No,
never.
But I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, you kind of, this is an interesting one. I'm proud of you for doing the live thing. That's a challenging thing to do every time you do this.
Thanks. I kind of love it because it forces me and my guests to show up authentically, right? Like it's not going to be edited. So when I forget to close my door, I just close my door. Or my dog's snoring, I just say, you may be able to hear my dog snoring, and like, who cares really? Like why not just be who you are on live TV.
Well, you mentioned that, and I was going to say, if we can get a look down there, there's
Hi, babe.
there's Sadie right there.
Hi,
Hey, Sadie.
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 Oh, she's
Remember I
so
said
cute.
squirrel? Oh, she heard us talking about squirrels earlier, and that about sent her.
Are you serious? She's like,
Just like,
hello. Aw. My dog's usually here because she was biting my baby, but she finally stopped that. So now she's been at home.
oh, God, that's a bad thing.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. But now she's been great. So, but she's 14, and even if she was here, she wouldn't hear us because she's deaf. So she would just like snore in the corner. Anyway, thanks everyone. Thank you so much, John. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Yeah, of Executives Uncut. And listen, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe, share with someone who could benefit from this talk, and visit hodgescoaching.com for new episodes. We are on pretty much every podcast platform there is, or you can follow us at Hodges Coaching on social media. Thanks again, John. And I'm Sarah Hodges. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, girl. Thanks for having me.
Of course.